We have a seat for you. Right here, next to you.
I got my job well. She's bringing another reason. I want to rip. That's all. That's all. No, plastic. She's gonna grab a clip. Well, would it be better if we could put that? Yeah, yeah. Just put it- yeah.
Hey, how are you?
How about this, my friend?
Yeah, we do.
How's everything?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Are you recording?
I will do that in just a second.
Introduce myself, most of you probably know, I'm your District 1 Councilor, Christine Long. Can you hear me? So today is our office hours, and actually we invited our new councilor, Brandon Ward, District 2, so everybody could meet him. And Adam Steiner, our councilor, from District 3 is here. We have an Adam Gracious, he's going to be recording this, and he has a Zoom link for those who want to virtually attend. He also brought a district map for many of you who are concerned or confused about what district you're in and who your representative is, and it shows you the road, the street, or wherever you live and who your counselor is. In addition, we have Lester Baker, our police chief, here. You have him. We have DPW Director Bob Lewis to my far right. Longtime Assistant DPW Director Billy Sedowitz. Many of you probably already know him to answer questions. Have a resident, he's here as a resident, but he's economic development. He is Rick McKenna sitting in the front. So we invited all of you here today because we haven't had office hours for a few months, and we like to do this jointly because we have a big district to cover and a lot of things going on. So what I would like to do is just vet questions from the residents as to who they want to ask questions to and what your concerns or questions are for all of us in all of our districts. So any takers?
I don't have a question, but I got a comment.
Okay, so here.
Okay, thanks for coming.
I just wanted to address something that came up that happened probably about a month ago or so ago. Many of you might have received a 4 a.m. phone call from reverse 911.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to explain that. So there's a system called reverse 911. There's another system called Rave in the city. Also has a third system where we can send out messages. Usually those messages just say, hey, there's a snow emergency or something to that effect. The police department can also use that system. So you receive a call at 4 a.m. Now, we don't just send calls out at 4 a.m. for no reason. I think we've only sent one other out at that time of day. Now, what I can tell you, you're gonna have to read between the lines because there's things I cannot say that involve other people's business. The same way if I knew personal information about you, I couldn't just give that out to everybody. But we had a missing person, and that missing person, we felt the need to notify you due to their mental status that they were missing. So if somebody knocked on your door at that hour, this may be that person, and I do not want you to let them in. Now, I need to do that at 4 p.m. or 4 a.m. So I'm sorry if I woke you at 4 a.m, but I would rather wake you up and tell you that there's an endangered missing person that could show up at your house and wake you up, as opposed to that person going into your house and having something tragic happen. Now, where we dropped the ball is, we then made a call about 20 minutes later that said we found them. We could have told you that in the morning. So we'll do better on that second call, but I'll never apologize about making that first call. Again, I would rather wake you up and let you know, do not open your door, and there's somebody out there that you should not interact with, and if somebody does come across, to call us, but we will do better on that second call. That's all.
You didn't want us to worry.
Thank you for that.
Christine, you want to let maybe Brandon, and then I can say hello to everybody.
Thank you, Christine. Yeah, I just would briefly introduce myself. So my name is Brandon Ward. I'm the newly elected district councilor for District 2, which in terms of Knobscot covers the neighborhoods that border Potter Road and a lot of Water Street past Potter Road. And so, yeah, really excited to be in this role, representing Knobscot and also what we know as Saxonville. I'm new to the role, so I'm here mostly in a listening capacity and to support the work that Adam and Christine have been doing for a long time. And to also bring new ideas, new perspectives, and yeah, be supportive. So great to meet all of you. Please find me afterwards if you have questions, and maybe I'll have something to contribute during the meeting today too. So thank you.
I've got a question on here, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
I'm a resident just down the road, almost walking distance off, right? And one of the main reasons that I came was hoping to get an update on Knobscot development. So hopefully somebody can provide me with guidance to where we are, when building, not building, what it is. So the question answer.
Brandon, can you repeat the question just for the Zoom folks?
Yeah, I was going to say you and everyone else that's here. The question was looking for an update on the proposed building project in Knobscot that I think people know is proposed between kind of the triangle between Livoli, Edmonds, and Edgel, and so, which is a really hot button topic. I don't know if someone wants to comment with the latest, so.
You could.
Isn't the question on the rezoning about the project?
Oh, yeah, this.
Correct, it says actually.
Good to talk
if-
about both.
So I guess the question would be, is there any real movement or what's the latest update? And we actually do have someone from economic development here that might be able to tell us if there is anything in the plans, Mr. McKenna. So if you could. On down.
Hi, how are you? Just a little bit of update on Knobscott Village, which is what it's called.
No, we're talking about the 27 acres.
Oh, the 27 acres. I thought you meant the other development.
No, he's talking about the
Okay,
thing that may be assisted living.
okay, there is nothing concrete as far as any new plans. The original plan that everybody heard about, I think, is just been pushed off the shelf, so something else might be coming, but there's nothing official yet, so stay tuned.
You can go on about, I know what's going on with Knobscott.
Just. So Peter Stelios, who is the owner of the project the other project on Water Street, there is some update on possible on-street parking, which I know I'm not in favor of, but Mr. McKenna might be able to address more details. But that project is due to be completed about February of 2025, and the lease out should take place somewhere around June of 2025, where they start, currently they're doing a marketing plan for the workforce and affordable housing. So I'm gonna let Rick actually give you more detail because he's involved daily.
Well, as far as the parking goes, it's, if you remember back when everything was coming together, one of the plans was to have some parallel parking on Water Street. And then there was a big push against that, and it was back and forth. And somehow in the final plans, it was removed. Now, they would like to see it come back in, okay? Good to hear from the residents here. One of the main concerns is you've got 10,000 square feet of retail in the front. And it's, on one side, it's 4,000, and then there's a common area, then there's 6,000. So the area up towards Edgel, that space is can be built out for a restaurant, if a restaurant decides to go in there, as far as hoods and what have you and venting. The other side will not be, okay? And I was told by the realty people that early 25 would be the lease out, so early, and so that would be probably February to June, you know how things go. And I think that's about it. And any other thoughts on
No,
that? You got that done? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I just wanted to introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. I'm Adam Steiner, District Councilor for District 3, and I live off of live on McAdams in the neighborhood that would be destroyed by the proposed rezoning that thankfully has been put back on the shelf. But I would say the last time we were here, that was a huge concern, and we packed this room, and I think the message was loud and clear that we were not going to stand by while they destroyed our neighborhood. And I think that made the difference. So we will keep you updated. Please stay involved on, whatever developers come up with for those parcels. But we'll, Christine, me, Brandon, we'll continue to keep you updated and make your voices loud and strong, because they definitely hear us when we speak to them. Yes, you have a question?
Yeah, doesn't this all come down with the zoning change? And the question is, does that come up for vote to the city council? And what does it require, 2/3 positive to change it? You could update us on that. And is there a vote that's being proposed at some point?
Okay, so the question was, would the development, and we're talking about the triangle between Edgel, Edmonds, and Livoli, would that require rezoning? The answer, right now they could build, single family homes, open space cluster development. But if they wanted to do the crazy project they were starting to float, that would require rezoning. And everything I've heard is that it would require a 2/3 vote of the city council to do that. So we have 11 members, so that would be 8 yeses. And There's been some debate about whether that could possibly be changed to a simple majority, but I haven't seen anybody agree that's the case. And the good news is I know that there are several councilors who've come out strongly opposed to that rezoning with that project in mind, including the three people up here. Now, they might, they own a bunch of parcels out there. They don't own some of them, but they could come back with some other kind of rezoning idea. And I don't know if you want to talk about what you've heard as a possibility. But the bottom line is anything other than single-family homes and open space cluster development would require a rezoning change, a zoning change.
What can they do by right?
So by right, they can put in single-family homes, they can put in a cluster development. So by right, that's what that land could be used for. So cluster development means it's an allowed by special permit to build. Most of you are probably familiar with Millwood, what that looks like. So that's a cluster development. There's several cluster developments throughout Framingham, depending on what district you're in, but for District 4, it just allows more density on the property rather than a single family home on a 1 acre lot. Yes. Would you like to make
Given what's happened to Milton, where it seems to me that they were doing a lot of rezoning proposals and people voted against it, and then there's a lot of pressure with the state with their mandates, and now the city's not going to get any state grants. I could see a lot of pressure being put on Framingham to say, hey, listen, you're one of the areas that we're looking to grow. What assurances do we have that we're thinking through those things long term to minimize the impact? Because I feel like that's going to come. If I was the developer, I'd be 1-800, call the governor, make a complaint. We want to develop and citizens don't want it. So how do we address that conflict that we see across the state of Massachusetts?
That was a statement because of MBTA. That the issue with Milton was the state governor Baker passed some legislation that said, I believe, if you were within a half mile of an MBTA line, bus route, then that zoning kicked in. So obviously downtown, we have that issue, but up here in Knobscot, I don't believe we're subjected to that unless somebody knows of an MBTA route that's coming through.
So you are correct, Mr. Simonelli. So the question is relative. So what happened with Milton is they actually voted not to allow that increased density zoning for MBTA. So that's their issue. And there are other communities that are very much opposed to it, but the trade-off is if you vote it down and you don't create a district for MBTA development, then you don't get state grant matching funds. So, and as I can help TPW address a lot of the funds that we get from the state because we have created that back in 2016 to get ahead of not being in compliance. So we do have one train stop, as you know, in Framingham. So that is the CB district. It's an MBTA compliant district. Currently, we are in compliance. We got waived in because we had the planning board, when I was on the planning board, we created workforce housing. So that gave us a credit temporarily, but we still need to up our game. And the state gives you, there is a chart online under MBTA zones that will show you how many units each community is responsible for developing. There is some talk at the state level about increasing that and finding housing choice parcels, which is different than the MBTA zone districts, but it does allow sort of an overlay district into areas that possibly eventually could be used to be more high dense zoning, but that's different than the MBTA. So unless you have a train stop or a train or a trolley in your neighborhood, then I wouldn't worry about that. Knobscot's definitely not a MBTA spot, but it could be a housing choice parcel. Yeah, so we are responsible for creating 4,000 more units for the next year. And currently, I'm gonna let Rick address this because I haven't been following the planning board that carefully lately. But I know that we have a lot of units being built currently on the south side, so we may be meeting some of that requirement, but not sure, so. Would you like to?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, a little bit. Currently, this is known as 3A, okay, MBTA communities. We are in compliance. So when we've had a lot of meetings with different municipalities around, they're all over the place trying to figure out how they're gonna do this, okay? As Christine mentioned, if we go against it like Milton did, we will lose state funding. Now, a town like Wayland, for example, if they have to do this, now they abut Framingham, which is an MBTA community. So if you abut a community, then you have to be involved in this also. It's pretty widespread. Milton, they're already losing state funding right out of the gate because the state doesn't want to be messed with. So as I was saying, for somebody like a town like Wayland, you don't have too much money coming in from the state. Framingham, on the other hand, we rely on state grants and funding all the time. I just got one recently for downtown facade improvement program. So we're working on trying to get state grants because that's where the money is right now. So we have to be very careful about that. So as I was saying, we are compliant and certified for this year. And the other communities, most all of them are not. But however, for the next year, we have to come up with a plan, okay, for 4,000 more units. Now, one thing that's happening, if you're familiar with Logan Express, Massport tried on 3 unsuccessful occasions to get federal money to increase the size because that place is jammed. It's very popular. So they decided to just go to the state and do it themselves. So that's been approved, and they will be adding millions and millions of dollars worth of a couple more stories up there. Now, they are considered an area for the MBTA, okay, because of the buses. And we're checking out right now that there's possibility that the MWRTA, if you take that route in Framingham, that anything a half a mile from there could also be included. So we're kind of still wading through all this. And I guess the good thing is all the other communities that have to deal with this, they're all keeping in touch with each other through the MAPC and some of the conferences and different meetings that we have. So we have the chance to kind of follow out what everybody else is doing, how they're doing it. And then we might have a better idea. But it's all coming into fruition soon. We're going to try to be proactive, and community development, planning development is working on all staff. We're all going to get updated on all the rules and regulations so that if there's a meeting like this, somebody has a question, we can know exactly what's going on. And that's more than I know right now, but that's where we're at right now, okay?
So you're talking 4,000 units. That means if you have, let's say you average 2 people per unit, that would increase the city's population by about 10%. Am I hearing you right?
The population is 72,000 plus.
So I just rounded it up.
Yeah, this is a state situation, and we do have a choice, just fight it, and then we lose tons of money. This whole Knobscot, Christine, wasn't that Mass grant?
$3.2 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the intersection improvement and GPW can address that also was $3.2 million of state grant money to do that intersection, and that's just a small area, so that's how much money we lose. So, and actually, I think I'm gonna ask DPW to comment on either one of them, on the money that we do get from matching grants all over the city for work that we need for infrastructure improvement.
If you guys could also comment on the on-street parking.
Oh, and also, yeah, to comment on any possible proposal for on-street parking on Water Street.
Hi, as Christine said, Bill Sedowitz, Public Works Department. Yes, we've been very fortunate. We've received multiple grants. The closest one here, as was said, is over $3 million. That was a mass work, so those are typically tied to housing. So it was tied to the redevelopment there. But we've gotten complete streets, we've gotten a variety of projects, funding through the state. So, others can worry about the policies and whether, we fight that or not fight that, but we certainly have been fortunate to receive millions and millions of dollars of grant money. And I think I'll let, you want to talk about that? So yes, the project, the city advanced did not have on-street parking. That went through a lot of discussion and vetting. It did not have on-street parking. I know we've been approached about a plan to add on-street parking. If the developer decides to pursue that, there are a number of factors. There's a lot of infrastructure that we installed that would have to be relocated. So underground, there's conduit for the street lighting, there's conduit for future fiber connections, the curb lines, the sidewalks. There's quite a bit of effort and expense if somebody wants to advance that. But again, we didn't include it in our project, and we'll see where that request goes. But
City would pay for that.
Yeah, who ends up paying for those costs?
so normally, the developer would pay the entire cost. That would also include granting the city an easement that would push the public sidewalk on a private property. So we want to make sure that we have legal rights to plow and maintain that going forward. But yeah, the expectation is the city wouldn't contribute anything financially to make that happen.
Can I ask you a question on the intersection? If you're on Water Street or Edmonds, are you allowed, is it legal to go right on red? I don't see a sign that says no right on red, and I don't see a sign.
Yeah, so state law says you can make a right on red unless it's posted otherwise. So in a couple of locations where people were confused and that became a bigger problem, we actually did post signs, right on red after stop. Somewhat hesitant to do that. I mean, the city has almost 8,000 regulatory traffic signs or traffic related signs. And over signing leads to decreased compliance. So in a couple areas where we thought it was particularly important to emphasize that, we have added those signs, but state law is yes, unless posted otherwise, right on red is permitted.
Now I heard there's a new law, there's a defined crosswalk. They're changing the right on red. I don't know if that's, that's valid, what I've read is accurate or not. But it's a defined crosswalk, or if you have a bike lane, the right on red will no longer be allowed.
Yeah, I don't think that's been adopted yet. It's the first I heard of that. You do need to yield, obviously, to people in crosswalks.
Yeah,
But,
it's stop and then go right on red. Yeah, but it was just, to me, it was confusing to go on.
I think.
Just to answer that, it's not adopted yet, but there are talks about doing that. In some communities, the biggest one is the city of Cambridge. You can't turn right on red anywhere there, but they've adopted that as a city ordinance. So some cities have taken it upon themselves, but as far as statewide, that's still being.
Yeah, it just gets confusing. You go from community to community, they adopt their own, so.
Exactly.
I would have thought a sign, but.
Not sure who's first. A lot of hands.
Just a quick question, that 4,000 unit you described, what's the timeline? Is it next 5 years, next year? When does if we were to build out the 4,000 units, approximately what would that take until?
Pass that one up to someone.
Yeah.
If you could just repeat the question.
So the answer to that question.
Christine, can you repeat the question?
The question is, the 4,000 units that were responsible for creating to stay in compliance would have to be done by year end 2025.
Plan.
A plan, we have to have a plan in place. So.
I heard that maybe they were gonna close the Hemingway School, is that true?
So I've actually heard that also, and I'm not sure about the answer to that question. Does anybody know that? No. So there's
I can
talk
take it.
about that, but.
Yeah, so the city is in the Mass Building Association process for building a new elementary school. And it's looking at both the Hemingway and what's the future of that building, but also building a new school on Bethany Hill on the south side. So that committee and the superintendent and all of us are gonna have to talk about Hemingway and how we should fit those pieces together. So one possibility would be that we'd have a new, full-size elementary school in Bethany, and then Hemingway could be turned into an early childhood center, or we could get creative with that property as well. But the bottom line is that Hemingway, I know when my kids went there 10 years ago, it was in rough shape. Yes, it hasn't gotten better. Something needs to be done to replace that building, do some major construction, but we also need an elementary school. Yeah, parking would be nice.
Any possibility of a community, some kind of community center?
This is just me speculating. I don't think so, because we just bought the former Marion School as a community center, and that's gonna take millions and millions of dollars to build out and make accessible. And so I don't think the city's gonna have the capacity for another community center on the north side. Maybe we'll go back here.
Regarding the on-street
You
parking.
wanna- All right, I'll repeat the question.
Does the city have a course to provide that business, or is it a sort of wrong conclusion that the developer for the city would just agree to that? Like, is there a path to it?
Yes, absolutely. So my understanding is that the developer will need to go to the planning board, make a presentation or request. The DPW will clearly weigh in on what would be involved with that, which, it's good to hear clarity that it's not just you slap some lines down the road and call it a day. They would actually have to move the entire sidewalk over towards the project, and that involves all the work that they did, so.
They're on the sidewalk now, they're on the sidewalk.
Yeah, it's pretty close, but they're just, what is there, like 10 feet or something like that, so yeah, the planning board would have a chance to say, we just can't make this happen, or, it'll be up to them, with our input.
Okay. Right, so.
All right, we'll go to the side of the room. Yes.
What are they building on Edmonds Street across the street?
What are they building on Edmond Street across the street here?
What is going to go there?
Oh,
Land?
That just big empty space?
Yeah.
So that's part of that triangle of 27 acres, and so right now there is no plan for that big open area they clear cut. That's the thing that was part of the discussion about rezoning. So as of right now, there's no plan that's been released about what they want to do with that parcel of land. All right. I want to maybe hear from you folks, and then we'll come back to you if you don't mind. Oh, sorry. So we'll go to this side, and then we'll go back and forth. So yes.
Okay, you're planning on 4,000 more units. Are you planning to improve any of our streets? Okay, because I can tell you right now, it is horrible traffic. Okay, I can't get out. I live in the North Scott area, and when the schools are coming in or out, I can't get home, and I can't get in or out. Traffic is just terrible.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I don't know. It's bad now, adding 4,000 units, whether it's north side, south side, anywhere. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
I know living on McAdams, just trying to turn left on Edgel every day, you gotta have patience, and I got a 17-year-old who just got a license, so.
So actually, I live on Hemingway, so I understand, I can't get near my house after 3 o'clock because the traffic is backed up down the Potter Road. And then there's parking all over Cider Mill, parking up and down Hemingway, and it's a mess to begin with. And the answer to that question that Adam had referred to, the planning board would be the one that the developer has to go to the planning board to request a change to the plan. They would have to vote to change the current plan to allow parking on the street, which would be probably a majority vote. At any rate, I would encourage you all, if you do see that on the planning board agenda, show up. Show up virtually, show up in person, and make sure you let your voice be heard. And I understand the developer is not happy with the retailers that are looking at this space, but in my opinion, as the chairman formally of that board, we had this discussion for years, and, you know, that project was permitted the way it was permitted. That should have been something that was thought of during that time about either downsizing the number of units that went into the project to allow for that parking. But to me, to come back in now is just, I just don't get it. So I don't see why we would do that. Yep, and as far as infrastructure, I'm gonna turn this over to Bob Lewis.
Morning all. As far as the new development goes, there is a collaboration with the planning board and Public Works. Public Works' position is that we look at the road infrastructure, we look at the road infrastructure, we look at the water, sewer, all the services that go to those neighborhoods, within that neighborhood. So if there's any impacts that this project is going to cause, we call that a mitigation, and we put that mitigation process on the developer. So, you know, such as the project down here, where they want to, the developer wants to have parallel parking on the street. He bears all that cost, or she bears all that cost. And it's the same thing with any other proposed project. We're looking at projects constantly. Actually, Mr. Sedowitz, this is his game. He looks at all the projects. I look at the water and sewer, I look at the road infrastructure, and wherever there's, like I said, where there's any impacts, the developers bear all that cost. It doesn't come out of the taxpayers' pockets.
Has there ever been a recent instance where the traffic study associated with development has pointed to a significant impact, or has the outcome of those analyses always been there'll be no significant impact?
I'll let Bill take that question. Bill's a member of the traffic commission.
Sounds like you already know the answer to that. So almost always they say a nominal impact.
I apologize for leading the question.
But it's a good question. But yes, it's pretty tough. Sometimes we'll get an independent, so we'll get another assessment to try to counteract that or offset that. But yes, very frequently they say there's no impact. It's a nominal impact, and then one project is nominal, the next, and all of a sudden, you know, traffic is just gridlocked. So, you know, I get that there's a desire to add more housing. There's reasons for that, but from a traffic network capacity issue, it is, you know, we're not adding new roads. So every time we add population, either internal to Framingham or our neighbors, you know, it does cause issues with increased traffic. So.
The quality of our lives just degrades further.
Well, again, each project has to get either permitted or the state, you know, we need to go along with what the state wants to do. All I can say is DPW does point out as best we can where we think, you know, the traffic impacts are going to be more problematic. But it is an issue. We've all seen the traffic impacts on the city. Yes, ma'am, all the way in the back. Yes.
Hi, Kathy
Oh,
Vassar.
Kathy.
Follow up to Scott's question. Over the years, when projects have come up and there's mitigation, typically the mitigation, a small percentage of the total cost of the project is what the mitigation is. How would that apply to a project like the one, you know, proposed parking on Water Street? Would it be just a small percentage of the mitigation would be on the developer, or would the total cost be on the developer? Well, that's what my assumption was, it was the total cost, but is that really what would happen?
Bill, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so I think the question is if there's impacts and mitigation identified as potentially appropriate, where does that cost lie? And I think it depends. If that's identified during the process, you know, historically there's been limits to how much mitigation. So I'm familiar with some projects where either the developer was required to do, in this case, traffic mitigation, either entirely or make a contribution that the city then used and coupled to make improvements. For this particular project, I mean, that project's already been permitted. At this point, I would say anything they want to do going forward is entirely on them. But a different project, that would all depend. The DPW would make a recommendation. The planning board could accept that recommendation or not, and there's limits to how much mitigation can be done. So, I won't get too much into the planning board process, but we try to identify those each and every project. Sometimes there's mitigation included, sometimes it isn't, sometimes it might not fully satisfy the proposed impact, and, we might have to try to plan a project to couple that money with others. Saxonville, with a number of projects were advanced, partially city funded, partially funded from the plan unit development. So we got, in that case, just a chunk of mitigation money that the city could use how it saw fit. So kind of each project, it's taken on its own, but at this point, that project is done as far as, I think the city's concerned, certainly as far as public work is concerned. So you want to make a change now, way after the fact, I believe that should be 100% funded on that. Yes.
I have a very simple question, away from the public department stuff. Do you guys know, do any of you know when the Noria is gonna open up the gas station? That was super psyched about it. The old library down in Saxonville, the public library. What's going on with the building? It's a perfectly cool building. Is anything that happened? That little building up the story thing.
Do you know the timeline for the? So the first question was the timeline for the gas station and convenience store opening.
From what I've heard, a couple of weeks ago, it was supposed to be the first week of March. So that's right around the corner.
I heard 2 weeks, but it might not probably won't be.
Really, yeah, you know how things go when they give a certain date there. I'm gonna try to find out, with the folks over there, and I'll pass on the information, to these guys here, and they can get it out, okay? But it's, if you go by and look inside there, the amount of work that they're doing, it's just about ready to go, yeah.
I think the second question was the former McCullough Branch Library. That's currently being used by one of the city departments, capital projects and facility management, has space in there. I don't know beyond that whether there's a long-term change in that use, but it is currently being used by the city. So there and there. Yes.
I have a question that's not directly related, but it has a lot to do with traffic. I don't know what influence city councilors or any of the departments represented here, what influence you might have, maybe even the police department, on the school committee, because the busing situation has created nightmares, not only for traffic, but for parents who have to sit in lines for hours, and buses that are showing up an hour late to take the kids home from school. It's really a mess. I've even been at schools that are polling places where the voters can't get in because the line of parents waiting to pick up or drop off is so long that streets are blocked in the area. It's the buses not being available, creating a need for parents to drive kids to and from school that is making a real extra mess that we don't need.
Absolutely.
The bus guy. DPW should be able to fix that problem, right? Please? No? The finance subcommittee meeting this Tuesday is having a presentation from the school department on the busing situation, in terms of people having to wait an hour, and they have a chart of every bus and how late it is, and there are routes that are a half an hour late every day, 45 minutes late every day. One of the big questions that's going to be presented to us is whether we should go in-house with busing and hire our own drivers. And there are some members of the school committee who are very much in favor of that, some who may not be, and I have an open mind about it. I think right now, what we're doing right now is not working. We cannot have a significant number of students who are late to school every day. And so we have to do something. And we went out to bid again, and there's some sort of monopoly, or there is a monopoly around the busing situation where we only get a bid from the current provider who's not doing a good job. I think they kind of have an agreement that they don't outbid each other. So
other than going in-house, it's really hard to make improvements. That said, that would just, perfect world, buses are on time, we're still going all over the city. The biggest help to that situation is going to be that new Southside Elementary School, which, yeah, it's 5 years off. But the bottom line is the vast majority of our students live on the south side of Framingham. The majority of schools are on the north side of Framingham. And we have school choice. So you have people who live in Knobscott who decide to go to, their kids to go to Barberry because there's two-way bilingual there. They go to Brofield. So allowing that Southside Elementary School to be there means there'll be more students who live close by to it, who are walking to school, and that will alleviate some of the need for buses. But that is 5 years off, about, give or take, so. Yes, my neighbor.
Yes, all the people who can walk to school have to be bused all the way over to Stapleton, and yet they could be walking and saving all this money if they end up being able to have children being able to walk to school again. Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. The kids they're being bused from where they could be walking to Dunning and to Walsh. And yet, what's happening is they're going all the way over to Stapleton. Well, look at all those extra buses that are being, look at all the extra money we're spending, and these kids could be walking.
Yeah, I mean, that's a question we hear a lot, and is why don't we just get rid of school choice? Let's go back to the way it was when I went to school and I lived near Potter Road and just walked there every day. The problem goes back to the fact that we have the majority of kids on the south side of town, and we have the majority of schools on the north side of town. And we have the majority of richer, whiter people on the north side of town. So if we just eliminated school choice, yes, the people who live in our neighborhood would just go to Dunning or they would go to Hemingway and they would be happy. More poorer people of color would be on those buses driving around all day. And the state actually told us, I don't know when school choice was made in the 90s, you can't do this anymore. It's like a civil rights violation. The richer, whiter people don't have to ride the bus. The poor people of color do. So there's just not a way to do that. And in terms of learning, it means folks who may need additional time in school learning are stuck on buses. So I do think that Southside Elementary School will be a big help with that because, and then I've seen that with Fuller. Fuller, the old Fuller School, middle school was falling apart. And so people would choose elementary schools based on which middle school they would go to. And they saw Walsh and Cameron as being better than Fuller. Now we have this beautiful new Fuller School, and more people are choosing to go to elementary schools that feed into Fuller. And that has changed the narrative around the Southside Elementary Schools. Building that brand new school on Bethany Hill will help with that. And the other thing I would say is that school choice, there are plenty of my neighbors who choose to send their kids to schools that are further away because they have programs they love, like two-way bilingual programs. Most communities don't have that, where your student is going to leave elementary school being bilingual in another language. So that's a huge benefit to having school choice. You want to follow up on that?
No. I wanted to ask the question that one of the reasons I came here. When we're looking at the Knobscott Square redetail, okay, I think it looks really nice. Everybody's done a great job on it. However, the idea was to make Knobscott Square a walkable, pedestrian-friendly square. Okay. Now, one of the reasons why the developer wants to have that parking that we really don't, a lot of people don't want, is because the retailers that they're trying to get in there are going to have a very difficult time deciding to lease there because there's no parking around here. That was one thing that doesn't seem that has been addressed. So I think the question is, do we want Knobscott to be a place, a destination for people to come and shop and go to get food there, or do we want it to be a drive-by? Because if we want it to be a destination outside of the people that live within a half a mile, there's no place to park. And I wonder if any of you have any ideas how we could get more public parking in the area so that we can, you know, spend some money on our local retailers and what have you.
I mean, I would just say that the plan I saw for the Knobscot Plaza development had parking right behind all of those stores. You know, and somehow, and there was like a path where you could even park back there and then walk through, and somehow in the process, the developer changed it, so now there's no parking behind the stores. All the, you know, the residents are pushed right up against that. So, you know, if I, you know, when we were planning the plaza, and if we'd had that discussion, like, we need to have on-street parking, well, fine, push all the buildings back, and, you know, maybe we could do nose-in parking like they have in Natick, you know, come up with something creative. But now it's like, the thing's already built, you built it really close to the road, and now you want to push the sidewalk even closer to it, just to add, I mean, how many spaces could you fit in there, you know, like 10 or 15? So yeah, and then, you know, I don't think it's a very walkable plaza. I mean, I think about the CVS. It's like if you walk down McAdams to go to CVS, if you don't watch where you're going, you're gonna fall into the drive-through, you know, pit. So, yeah, so I don't know. I just know that it's not our job to spend $1 million to fix the road to meet the needs of the developer after they've already built the project. Period. So, and then, you know, across Water Street, there's some, you know, there's some buildings with plenty of parking. Some of them are owned by Mr. Russo. Maybe he'd be willing to do so. Okay, maybe he wouldn't be, but let's have that conversation at least, you know. And then somebody mentioned the Hemingway School. You know, let's get creative. A non-creative solution is, yeah, let's just throw $1 million into rebuilding a road we just built to add a few parallel parking spaces and have people trying to parallel park with cars backed up behind them going to Hemingway. Like, does not seem like a good idea. Anybody else want?
Yeah, so let me just address that as the planning board chair at the time when this originally was permitted. This was permitted as a neighborhood. It's Knoxville Village neighborhood. It wasn't really meant to be a destination for everybody to come to. It was more the plaza, the redevelopment of the B4 zoning was to feed the existing neighborhood, not to be a giant draw from everybody all over town. And as DPW has so well articulated that every time you do a project, I don't care where it is in Framingham, it affects every single neighborhood and the traffic pattern throughout Framingham. So the more parking, you know, yes, we need parking. And to the other question about the property across the street that Charlie Russo owns, I already talked to him about that, and that's a big hard no. So, because that would impact his ability to develop on the Knobscot B4 zoning, because he's gonna need parking when he develops his properties. So, that's the answer to those questions.
Christine.
Charlie, probably. Hold on.
So just to personally address that question around what the vision is for Knobscot, I don't think it should be a destination for all over, for people from all over the city and from neighboring communities, but there's a middle ground that we hope to find, and that's why projects like the Blue Stream and Rail Trail that are being planned to come right through and next to Knobscot are really exciting because it gives people the opportunity to come into Knobscot, to walk, to bike, to utilize the resources without adding cars on our roads, without adding additional parking. And so as much as we can support projects like that, I'm also working on a project to make the Sudbury Aqueduct that comes from over near Saxonville and Elm Street, to make that more accessible and bike friendly. And so projects like that I think are really exciting, and it's a good middle ground where people utilize Knobscot without bringing more cars on our roads. So, Terry.
I do a lot of walking these days. I'd like to bring up the fact that sidewalks are treacherous. It's ice and they're not walkable. So I end up walking on the street because I'm afraid that I'm slipping. And I'm wondering who's supposed to be taking care of that part of the maintenance, because it's not being done.
Bill, there's a bullseye on my chest there now. So as far as sidewalks go, we plow about 106 miles of sidewalk. Sidewalks?
Yes.
Oh.
And it needs to be taken care of, so we can walk on this mountain. sides that are.
So what I was leading up to, the only sidewalks that we maintain during the winter are the school walking routes. We don't make the determination of what sidewalks get maintained. That comes from the school department. So they don't do it often. They don't often change the routes, but I've seen it done a couple of times where they'll reevaluate where these drop-off areas are, where the populated kids are walking to their routes.
I'm a
But-
pedestrian.
So there's 106 miles that we plow. There's over 300 miles of sidewalks that we don't maintain during the winter.
A follow-up, to Terry's question, I don't think she's talking about the plowing per se. I think the sidewalks have these huge potholes in them, cracks in them.
No, I'm talking about the ice and snow left there that is treacherous, especially in front of some of the apartment buildings. I walked down to Knobscott on Edgell Road, from here to Edgell Road, going to CVS and the Knobscott Plaza there. The sidewalks have been unwalkable. They're treacherous because they're icy and they're snowy.
Are they commercial sidewalks? Are they in front of
I don't know
commercial?
what they are. I'm a Knobscott resident of Knobscott.
If they're in a business district, if they're in a business district, we will take care of them. But the residential, yes. Yes. So you can call Public Works, and we do sand and salt the sidewalks. Well, call us. We'll get over there and. Well, I think it's 40 degrees coming up today. I don't think there's any ice there now, but when there is, you can give us a call.
The apartment house down the block has not been shoveled,
That's an area that we don't maintain. We would look to the property owners that are in front of those to maintain those sidewalks.
And you're asking residents to call particular places going to take care of these things, there's something wrong here.
There's only so much that the Public Works can do.
I think I'm addressing my counselors because I think this is an issue for citizens of the.
Right, so the property, so sidewalks in front of property owners, they own clearing those sidewalks and keep them in care.
Yeah.
So if you have an issue with that, then call me, and then I can get in touch with the owner. But other than that, that's not DPW's purview. Also, at some point, I want to address the water sewer billing issue.
Oh, boy.
So, but Councilor Steiner has something?
Yeah, just, the question, I'm just trying to repeat the question for people on Zoom. So the question was about sidewalks in Framingham and who's responsible for clearing snow and ice. And right now, with the exception of the ones Bob was talking about, and I want to address those are up to homeowners. So like in our residential side streets, homeowners have to clear their sidewalks. And the majority of people in Framingham don't do that. And we've had discussions about, well, what if we made it mandatory or whatever? And there definitely was an outcry like, no, that's going too far. But I know, on Adams, we have kids who walk down to the intersection with Frost Street to catch a bus. And a lot of them end up walking in the street because the sidewalk is completely impassable because homeowners haven't touched it. So it's something where we have to sort of talk as a community. It'd be great if just more people did their own sidewalks in front of their houses, or if they're paying somebody to plow their driveway, ask them to also give the sidewalk a little treatment. There is somebody who's raising their hand. I think we're going to try and take a question from Marlene on Zoom, if you don't mind. Test out the technology here, and then we'll go back to questions in the room. So, Marlene, I'm going to come over and unmute you, and then hopefully we'll be able to hear you, but fingers crossed. Thanks.
There. Hi. Am I okay now? Children are wonderful, and we are producing our future.
Marlene, you go ahead.
Okay. I feel, of course, children are wonderful, and they are our future.
Well, the technology didn't work. That's how it goes. Marlene, if you want to type your question in the chat, then I will relay it to the room, and I will, oh, we have a tech expert. Trying, okay. While she's trying, Marlene, if you want to type in the chat, then we'll come back.
Okay.
And other folks on Zoom, if you want to type your questions in the chat as well. All right, well, we're working on that. Oh, yeah, water and sewer billing question.
Is it better if you see me? As horrible as
Good one, Christine.
Can you hear me?
Who's having issues with the water bills? So I don't even know where to start because there's so much that's happening in the water and sewer billing area. I can tell you though that what we've discovered is that the water meters themselves in your homes are working fine. The problem that we're having is we have a system where it's a radio read system and it goes out to the internet, and we're having problems with the devices that are on top of the meters, not the reader itself, but the sending unit that's on top of that. It goes to Public Works, it goes to the offices, the water billing techs, the clerks, they read those meters, and they take it as information, as true information as the best they can. Bills go out, we hear that they're wrong, and I'm not sure if there's anybody in here that's called the water department and challenged that. But the problem that we found is that the software updates to the water billing system was outdated. It was outdated by several generations, and when you talk about technological information and technology, generations are about.
You know, I was trying to
years.
start it.
Right? So they were outdated by generations.
I really don't want to.
So that's a separate billing system. That has to talk to the city's billing system, which sends the bill out to you. So they have to be in sync. And I use this analogy right here. They have to be in sync. What was happening was they were up here like this. So we had some issues with it. We've got that straightened out. We're actually changed our meter vendor. We've gone from one vendor to another. We're in the process of running 2 parallel systems. Back in 2007, they did like a citywide residential meter changeout program. In 2017, they did another upgrade. So my philosophy is that we need to have a steady diet of meter changes, because the life expectancy of a water meter is what the manufacturer tells you is 15 years. I believe it's closer to 20, but the goal is to change out meters on a steady diet and just smooth that out financially across the board. And that would put about a workload of changing out 1,500 meters on our department each year. So that's the goal. The challenge now that we have is getting into the homes where there's 2 adults that have to work. Trying to get into that home during the day is a real challenge for us to change out those meters. So that's why in the past, some of these things haven't been updated. So we've got a heavy workload ahead of us. We feel confident that things are running well as far as the technology goes. And we do have our day-to-day issues with meters. We had an issue down on the south side where an old meter just blew off. The pipe itself, the pipe itself was old and corroded, right? And the pipe broke, and they had water just gushing into the basement. We went down there, we shut it off, we actually fixed it. Because we know we have cold temperatures out there. Normally that would be the homeowner's responsibility, but we patched it together so that they could get a plumber in there and they can have their water for the night. So those are the day-to-day things that happens. But this system-wide, I think we're in a good place right now. If you have a problem with your water meter, or you think there's a challenge with it, feel free to call the water department. You can call them from 8:30 to 4 every day, and someone's calling me now. And you know, they'll look at your individual case. Go ahead, question.
Yeah, while we're talking about water meters billing, can you speak to the debacle currently with townhouses and condominiums in Framingham?
So that's another area that we some of the forensics that we've done.
Bob, can you repeat the question?
So there's a question about or multifamily dwellings, or multi-unit dwellings that are getting a factor, I call it a factor. Some are getting it, some are not. Back in 2007, we found, let me back up. As we get into the forensics of discovering this factor, if you will, we found that back in 2007, there was a vote by the selectmen, by the Board of Selectmen, that to eliminate this multi-unit factor. So we have approximately 2,900 multi-unit dwellings, and it's just by happenstance that half of them get this factor, the other half don't. And what that means is, what the factor means is that if you have a multi-unit dwelling, and let's say you have 150 units in that apartment house, then the factor was 150 would be divided across the bill, that because we're billing from one large meter. And that essentially puts all of the water in possibly a tier 1 or a tier 2, which is less costly than going down into tier 4 or tier 5, where the water bill should actually be billed. So there was a vote to remove that. I can't speak to why it wasn't removed, but I can tell you that there are 50% of the units in the city that don't have it, and 50% that do. We've just hired a consultant. We're going through that analysis now of where the dollars and cents will be when that factor gets removed. That's right now, we're gonna follow up on the vote from the Board of Selectmen to remove that factor. So again, I can't speak to why it wasn't removed in the past. All I can tell you is that we discovered this and we're gonna fix it. Hope that answers your question.
But yeah, but that seems to be blatantly unfair if you have, say, a condo with 150 units that are technically individual taxpayers, as if it was a single family house, and whatever the point, say, in the 70s or 80s when it's built, only 1 meter was used versus 150.
Right, I think the way.
Probably not your issue, but that's a big issue, and that's a big concern for anyone who lives in a condominium who was benefiting from the factor and suddenly kicking into tier 4 or a tier 5. That's not fair.
Right, I understand. I completely understand. I think going back to what the Board of Selectmen minutes were, I think the philosophy was that these condominium projects are managed by an association or some management firm. It's there for profit. If the water meter is being, let me back up. If the unit is being billed by one large meter, then the philosophy is that they should pay for that water in whole, going through that one large meter. And then that puts that company would pay for the full volume of that water. Go ahead.
Yes, but you explain the tier system. Some people pay different amounts for water, depending on how much you use.
So the question is, to explain the tier system. So the tier system is based on your consumption of water. And the rates are from 0 to 12, from 12.1 to 24. Tier 1 is 0 to 12. Tier 2 is 12.1 to 24. And then 24.1, what's that? 24 what? Units. So each unit, the question was, a unit is 100 cubic feet of water. So that's 750, roughly 750 gallons of water that you use as one unit. So the volume of water that you use is measured in 100 cubic feet. So one unit is 100 cubic feet. That makes sense? So there's different rates for each tier. So the more water you use, the more you're going to pay. The incentive why these tiers were put in place was for water conservation.
Tier 1 pays more than tier 5.
No, tier 1 pays less. A lot less, yes. Go ahead.
There are condominium associations in this town are being separately metered as their individual taxpayers. So that's discriminatory against the meters that are, for whatever reason, for the convenience of the town at the time when they were put in. So they wouldn't have to have, say, 150 bills.
Can I ask you to repeat that? Because I can't repeat that question.
The newer associations in town are separately metered, the newer condo associations that have been built are separately metered. So that's discriminatory against the older condominium associations that were for the convenience of the town at the time, only had 1 meter, so the town did not have to build 150 people, 150 meter reads. That's just what I mean.
So I'm not sure that that's 100% accurate. So the condo units that I'm aware of, which 3,000 of them have 1 large meter. I'll give you right over here, Windsor Green has 1 meter, 1 large meter. That's an older development. The Buckley, which is a newer development, there's 3 buildings in there. There's 3 large meters that measure that out. The Union House, which is down on Concord Street, 55 Concord, I believe it is, they elected, the management company elected to put sub-metering into those units. We have 1 large meter that we bill from. They don't get the factor. They get 1 bill, they read those sub-meters, they being the management company, reads those sub-meters, and they distribute the bill according to the usage of that unit. Go ahead.
Respectfully, sir, Windsor Green is a condo, Buckley and Union House are apartments. Windsor Green is a non-profit homeowners association. It's not like Buckley where there's a management company renting it out and they're making a profit on it. So I think it's kind of an apple and an orange comparison.
We look at it as 1 meter. We send out 1 bill to a management company. So whether it's a condominium or an apartment house, we look at 1 bill.
Like the condo, my daughter lives in one of the condos and they have 1 large meter. I'm not sure how the billing is arranged, but it originally was an apartment complex that has been switched to condo ownership. So they're individual owners. Would they have the option of having a single meter put into each of those residences so that they would not be forever paying a higher water bill? Or is there some other mechanism for dealing with single ownership versus an apartment complex? The single ownership has to pay the management company to manage their complex to begin with. And now it seems like there's almost a double payment, while apartments get to depreciate the value of their buildings. Owners do not. Condo owners do not.
So that's the reason why we bill off of 1 building. Let me just also say, Massachusetts passed a law back in 2013, 14, that the property owners could individually meter their units. And those meters could come to the water department. The problem with that is the plumbing system. Right? When these buildings were built, they ran main lines, if you will, and then branched off to separate units. That's nearly impossible to sub-meter that now. Management company could figure that out, but as far as from the water department, it would have to be a single dedicated line to each unit, to each individual unit, in order for us to bill you. Does that make sense? Question?
Yeah, I want to go back to the building on Water Street. My mind is boggled by what I hear about them wanting to change the parking. That would have been solved if the building was smaller to begin with. And it's the city council's job to understand what they were building there and not let them go that large on that building. The same thing happened with CBS. There was supposed to be another lane in the CVS, and they said they couldn't do it because they put it too close to Edgell Road. Well, why didn't they move the building back? All this should have been approved before any of this was built,
And that's why we're here now for the rezoning, because we want to prevent this. And now I'm hearing that Hemingway School might be gone, and I'm hearing 4,000 units. And I'm thinking, there's your new 4,000 units, right where Hemingway School is. When is this gonna stop?
So I'll speak to the turn lane. There was a concept plan many, many years ago to potentially have a third northbound lane on Edgel Road that would, so there'd be a dedicated left, a dedicated through lane, and a dedicated right. As we got into the design, we determined with our consultant that traffic operations did not require 3 lanes. We could have done that if we thought it was appropriate. We didn't. We advanced the design and had the 2-lane northbound. And I stand by that decision today. So, you know, the city owned that corner parcel. We could have kept a bigger easement before it got sold off and developed if we thought we needed that much space. We didn't think we needed that space, and I think the design is perfectly appropriate. So, yes, was there a plan very, very early on for 3 northbound lanes? There was. But every design stage subsequent to that, it was 2 lanes, and that's the way it was finalized, that's the way it was bid, and that's the way it was constructed. Second.
Question on that?
Actually, I had a question about the rezoning. District 3 residents wanted to help the audience demystify a little bit process here. If the developer went through with another proposal tomorrow, what is the procedural process here, and when should the citizen involvement be started?
So if there was a potential.
Christine, can you repeat the question?
So the question is, if a developer came in with a potential new plan to rezone the 27 plus or minus acres on Edmonds Road, what is the process? The process is he would have to come in with a potential plan that would go to, if it's for rezoning or for rezoning, that would go to the city council for rezoning. If it's a plan that meets zoning, that would go to the planning board. So if it's a rezoning plan, that would have to go to the city council for consideration.
Do any of you have a pulse of what this developer is, are they willing to settle, or are they pushing forward with trying to get the rezone still?
So the question is, do any of us have the pulse of what's going on with this developer as to what he's planning on doing? And the answer is not really. He owns the property. Obviously, he's going to want to do something on that property to develop it. I think he understands, or they understand, that we're definitely not looking to rezone the property. There has been some buzz about an assisted living facility going on the property, which would not require rezoning, but would require a special permit from the zoning board of appeals. So currently, that's the only thing I really know about that. And again, any map land use. So if you're going to change a zoning district or a zoning map, that change by law under 48.3 is a 2/3 vote of the city council or town meeting or whatever body would be the permanent authority, which in this case, the authority would be city council. So, and I don't see any vote, I don't see that would happen under this current city council. So, but it is possible that they could go to the zoning board of appeal to look for a permit if there was an assisted living facility proposed.
Christine, you're talking about potential assisted living on the RCS land, right? Not,
yes.
because their original thing was to rezone this huge area, including the other side of Edgel Road, you know.
Right, this would be on the RCS property that they bought that's got nothing going on right now. So, next.
It's a little building that's of historic interest that's falling apart. The only purpose it seems to be having right now is our building deteriorates quite much. It's historic, but it's never open. No one does anything about it. Terrible shape.
So the question is, there's a little building, I think you're referring to the former post office in Knoxville, and actually, Mr. McKenna is here because that's his pet project, I think. So I think the question is, what's the status of that building, and is there something gonna happen to restore it, put it in better condition? So I'm gonna give this to Rick.
Yes, it's a very historic building. It was the first standalone post office in Framingham, 1905. It was a train ticket station when the trains were there, and it was also a library. Okay, so all three of those. It's been moved around. Originally, it was up closer up on Edgell, right at Water Street, years and years and years ago, and it was 12 by 12. In 1905, when it was moved, it was doubled in size. Now, I started a project a few years back to hopefully turn that into a kid-centric, so to speak, museum. Kind of like a museum across from the brand new library. Okay, that's been kind of on hold. The Historic Commission of folks, they do not have that on their program coming up. I've been in there. We've already started on a new floor because the floor was down to the ground. I'm framing it. Let me tell you, from the outside, it looks a little bit rough. Okay, but the bones in there are perfect. Okay, so it's a matter of time and getting some additional people or some funding just to do that. The outside is pretty messed up, but that's just on the outside. Inside is very intact. Okay. What's happening with it? Nothing right now. It's not running. Okay, the outside. The outside on the shingles, that's been in disrepair for quite some time. What's that?
The outside is what people see.
Exactly. Yes.
So this next question is to Christine, if she could.
Thank you.
The apartment complex that's being built, the whole design was approved by the planning board. If they're not adhering, who monitors the construction of this after the planning board approves? We've already mentioned it's not set back to what you thought. If they're going ahead with this construction, isn't anyone watching it to make sure that it is to what was approved in the first place?
Right, so the question is the current development in Knobscott Plaza redevelopment. Is there any conformance going on with that? So the original plan got changed, the developer came in, the newer planning board that I'm not on, they approved the change to move the building up to the street further and make some other improvements because the developer thought that that would suit him better. And there should be, when I was on the planning board, we had an engineer that we had hired as one of our planning board workers, and we used to have somebody go out to do conformance. I don't know who goes out, but someone from the planning board at economic development should be out there doing conformance of the site. Inspectional services also does interim review to check off different phases of the project to make sure that the plumbing is checked off, the electrical and everything else before they give their final temporary certificate of occupancy and permanent. So inspectional services actually does have to be out there doing conformance along with someone from probably the planning board department staff or economic development.
Setback for the new village zone.
Yeah.
Or is that, I think that's what I'm concerned.
That's what I'm asking about the parking, that whole issue with the parking that was supposed to be there in the first place.
Right, so that plan got changed. I can't address that because the original permit met all the requirements under B4. So the current planning board permitted pushing it up the street, and actually the project now created its own problem with retail parking. So I don't know how to address that beyond that. Yes.
Just to follow up on that, it seems to me from hearing people here and what I've seen online,
that the project as it exists now bears very little resemblance to what we thought we all fought for those years, and years and years of meetings of Knobscot that we had where people argued for a supermarket and this and that, and this is what we finally got. And we thought that we'd come up with something that was going to be an attractive, livable plan. So what I'm hearing is that although that was voted for and approved by your planning board, thank you, later on, the developer could just basically get what he wanted in the first place by going in and asking for changes.
So the question is that although we went, and this went on for a decade, actually probably almost 2 decades, working with the neighborhood, trying to come up with some way to redevelop the plaza that was becoming a great district here. And as someone who lives right across from that plaza, it was concerning to me to see what was going on, you know, as the plaza deteriorated. So working with many meetings at different locations with hundreds of the neighbors coming out, we came up with a plan. And at that time, then I became a planning board member and I happened to be the chair that worked for everybody. So the plan that the planning board I was on approved actually did meet all of the requirements of the people that were living on the road behind the plaza, the library, the easement. There was multiple problems and multiple issues with getting that project done. So what happened later on, as you know, is the developer came in because he decided he wanted to make some changes that he thought would improve that development, and one of which changed the parking in the rear, pushing the building up to the street. And what should have happened is the planning board should have looked at that more closely, and there should have been a proposal to downsize the number of units. That way you would have less of a concern about how you can deal with parking, traffic, and to look at the building and how it fits into the neighborhood. So unfortunately, at this point, this is a done deal. So
basically, the developer got what he wanted in the first place.
somewhat, yes. So she's saying the developer got what he wanted. So, but you know, again, if you're a planning board member or a city council member, ZBA member, the power of the permit is huge, and it's up to us. Unfortunately, we have to come out and voice our disdain or approval of any project, and we have to keep our eye on the ball with this stuff. So,
It didn't do it.
So-
It didn't do it. Now it's over.
so in the back, Mary Kate.
Hi, Mary Kate, District 3. I don't live in Knobscot, I live in the far.
I'm gonna give you the microphone, so that way.
Hi, everyone. Mary Kate Feeney. I live over in Pheasant Hill, not Knobscot. But my question is, when we talk about housing, public transportation, all of these things, quality of life, and then Christine, you're 100% correct saying that it is your responsibility as a counselor and on the planning board to watch these projects and make sure that these things go through. When is Framingham actually going to start being proactive instead of being reactive, especially to the needs of the developers? And so what will you guys do as counselors, who I know you've been elected officials for a while, so what can we all do together, and what are you going to do as a counselor to make sure more proactive instead of reactive?
Thank you for that question. So I know for myself, I keep an eye on the projects, especially things that are going to affect us directly, and let my constituents know what's going on. Again, on this one, just slipped by us and it got approved the way it got pushed forward. Going forward, as you know, we're very active on making sure that we're keeping an eye on what's going on currently. So we have distribution lists, we've got people's email, we have an active email list, and we have a lot of activists in this audience that are keeping an eye on everything that's going on. So I know for myself as a counselor, being on the planning and zoning subcommittee going forward, again, we plan on making some more zoning changes and to keep active in making sure that projects are permitted the way they should. But we need to be showing up at planning board meetings more.
2 points. I guess one, following up on Mr. Foley's
on Windsor Green. I don't live there, I live in a regular house. In terms of the water billing, he's right. A condo is the same as a home, and you should get billed at a lower tier. An apartment building is out for business. Someone's making money on it. And I think whether it's the council or the administration or both of you, come up with what the rule is. It sounds like you know there's 3,000 properties that are 1,500 got the deal and 1,500 didn't, or units. And I guess my first question is, if you know those numbers, then you know what the units are. And I guess, will you make that list public? That's the first question. I'll take a yes or no on that one.
Yes.
Okay. When? Okay. Oh, he answered yes.
It's public information now.
How do we get it?
Email me.
Okay. That's it. Second point is, the 4,000 units in a year type of concept seems absolutely insane to me. Whoever did the math up front and came up with 8,000 people or 10% population increase, seems like a reasonable calculation to me. I guess either from the administration or even from the city council, obviously Milton told the state to pound sand and said, no, we're not doing it and we're gonna lose the money. So I guess my question is who in the administration or the city council is getting together either with other communities and band together and say, it's unfair. 4,000 new units is absolutely ridiculous. Especially since it sounds like it could come in up here, it could come down near more the D4 area, which is where I'm from. So I guess it's more, to me, it seems to me that the MBTA community should be banding together and fighting this, or at least asking for something more reasonable. So, maybe instead of having a double poll committee, we have the MBTA committee, which sits there and says, how do we join together with other communities to sit there and fight this? So I guess that's kind of my question, is just because the state's forcing this upon us, what's the administration or what's the city council doing to fight back?
Many of my questions have been addressed and answered, and I thank you all for your answers. I got a softer question here. Rail trail. Any projections to its completion from the Sudbury line down through Water Street?
So,
Your backyard, right, Christine?
yeah, actually, that is in my backyard. So there's 177 houses that run along the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. Sudbury is just finalizing their completion. I don't know the date of start. I don't know, Rick, do you know the date of start? No. So we just are funded. We bought that section that's 4.1 miles from Sudbury to through Knobscott down Mill Street. So I don't know, these things take forever to get done, because I remember when I first got the notice in my door that a rail trail is coming in my backyard. That was 20 years ago. So I expect you're probably looking at another 5 years before you see that actually come to fruition. Just a guess. Mary Kay, you know?
Yeah, I do.
Come on up.
What?
Come on up.
Hi, everyone. I'm your friendly trails person. So Sudbury is working on a bid. From what I understand, the Sudbury section should be done by this fall, which is very exciting. And Framingham has done the final purchase of this property back in January. And what they're doing right now is doing all sorts of, they did some surveying before we bought the property, but now it's going through and doing more environmental research, looking at analysis and trying to get a planner to do the planning. Massachusetts, MassDOT gave the city of Framingham about $7 million for the construction of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, which is fabulous. And so hopefully we'll be seeing some design soon. They're specifically looking at right now from the Sudbury line to Frost Street as the first section that will get done, that they're working on for design. And hopefully we'll hear more about that. And just a little plug, Friends of Framingham Trails, we have a Facebook group if you're on there. We also have an email list. I've been trying to keep everybody up to date on what's going on with the trails. It's very exciting. Hopefully it will be less than 5 years, but as we all know, these things do take time. So that's what's going on at the moment.
Thank you for that, Councilor Steiner.
Thank you for that update. Just a couple comments going back. So I know the planning department is talking to other communities about banding together to get serious with the state about what's realistic. I think another group that would be helpful is the MMA, which is this association of every city town in Massachusetts except for 2. Framingham as one of 2 cities and towns is not a member of that. The mayor has asked the city council to support rejoining the MMA. We left a few years ago. And I think that will, even though it's a small amount of money, for some reason there are councilors who are opposed to that. I think now would be a great time for us to get over that and get back into the MMA and work together with that organization to represent cities and towns and say to the administration, 4,000 units in a place like Framingham makes no sense. The other thing, on the water and sewer, making it public. So the finance subcommittee of the city council would be a great place to dig into that challenge. And George King is the chair of that, and I've asked him, and we have a meeting coming up. It's not on that agenda. I think it'll be on the next one, but I will remind George, and if you know Councilor King, remind him as well. Let's get the water and sewer situation on the agenda. Let's get that spreadsheet in our public portal so that everybody can take a look at it.
On that, a quick clarification question, just so I understand, you're saying that a recent selection meeting, at a recent board selection meeting, there was a vote about the whole tier system and condo owners, in 2007. So condo owner, the belief is that condo owners who individually pay property tax to the city of Framingham should be charged at the same tier as owners of apartment buildings who rent their units for profit.
So the Public Works doesn't see if it's a condo, if it's an apartment house. We see a water meter. We see a volume of water that goes through that meter. For some reason, which if I don't know, we can't identify why this factor was added or not added. I don't know those reasons. So in essence, there's discounted water in one area and no discounted water in the others. So we're trying to have an equal playing field. What the city council agrees to do, where that factor will remain or not remain, is not my decision. I look at water meters only, and I want to bill for every ounce of water at the proper rate. And I think that's fair across the board for everybody.
When you say equal level playing field, you mean one water meter versus one water meter, regardless of type of property.
Correct. I mean, in my personal opinion, if I own a condominium and my neighbor runs that water constantly, or they have a toilet leak and I've seen them, I mean, I can't tell you how many units of water just from a toilet leak that you get. I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever had that, at a high water bill that we've actually given an abatement on, or you've actually paid it. You fixed your toilet leak, but that volume of water, it's astronomical how much money that my neighbor could be using. Why should I pay for that? Is my opinion. Again, from a public works perspective, we bill from that large single meter, and we want to collect the volume, the true volume. Where that rate falls is where it falls.
Right, that decision apparently was made some while ago on the old government system. What is the process now for re-examining that decision of the new city governor?
So we've just hired a consultant to do the analysis on that. We could do it in-house, but it's a task that we don't have the people to do right now. So we've hired the consultant to get that independent report. And once that data is revealed to us, then decisions will be made amongst the city
Who makes
council.
that decision?
I believe the mayor will initiate it, and I'm not sure if that goes to the mayor or if it's a city council vote. I'm not sure.
The mayor's the rate setting.
I believe it's the mayor's decision.
Just to
follow up on what you said earlier, so is this, when the consultant is doing this, you said yourself, you say a property built in 1970, there's almost no way they could ever get individual meters, even if the city or the homeowner association wanted it, so presumably they'll take that into the study.
They're gonna study what's existing conditions now. They can't predict what it would do to change that in any particular condominium association or large apartment houses that were apartments and now condos. It's almost virtually impossible to figure out what the plumbing systems are in those homes to make that analysis.
But I guess I would submit that that is a really critical part of any analysis they do.
100%, 100% agree with that, yes.
So at least for me, like what I'm hearing is that there needs to be a more public conversation about what's fair and how people are charged. And so, and consistency, because right now, what it sounds like is that there are some apartment buildings that get charged with, or they get the factor and some don't. There are probably some condo associations that get the factor and some don't. And so that's by its nature, not equitable. And so where we ultimately end down with all apartment buildings and all condos don't get the factor, if all apartment buildings don't get the factor, but condos do get the factor, I think that's up for discussion, and I would love to be a part of that discussion, but it needs to take place. It hasn't taken place yet, and what's been raised today, I think, is really valid, and I would be very open to thinking about what would it look like for condos to be charged at a tier that's equitable for a condo, that might not be the same as what's done for an apartment building. So that's where I'm standing right now.
Any other questions on water meters? While I'm here, and we're getting close to, I just wanted a couple of public service announcements. You know, we're approaching construction season, and those nasty barrels will be up there. You know, so we've got a couple of projects that I want to talk about. One is a big one that's probably going to impact Edgell Road at Central. So that Edgell Road Central intersection is going to be reconstructed. The contract's been awarded. There'll be a set of lights there in the future. So over the summer, you're gonna see some impacts to your traffic along the way. We haven't seen any detour plans. That's actually a state project. That's a TIP project, the Transportation Improvement Project that we applied for with the state. So the state's paying for that. Another project that we're undertaking is, Bill, what's the contract amount? Just over $2 million for that project. So there will be some traffic impacts, you know, similar to the way there were traffic impacts on Union Ave. You know, that was such a much bigger project. Also, you know, there's been a lot of talk about Saxonville, the reconstruction of McGrath Square. So right after July, sometime in after July, that we're going to be doing some water work and some sewer work. We're applying for funding for FY25. We're confident that we're going to get that funding from the Finance Subcommittee. And once that happens, that project will go out to bid sometime in the fall. And then in construction season 2025, you'll see some work started in that redevelopment of that intersection. Questions?
Yeah. The lights over here on Edgell to take a left onto Edmond, we don't need another lane. What we need is a dedicated arrow, not just a blinking. We had a dedicated green arrow so we could take a left onto Edmond. That would be good. They said years ago that was an easy fix, but never fixed it.
We're making that note right now. All right. Also, there's another small project that's happening that's going to affect the commute through Belknap. The Flanagan Drive sewer pump station is going to be under reconstruction. That's a small little pump station. You're probably not familiar with it. It's off the beaten path, but the pipeline has to get replaced. So there's a small section between Flanagan coming east, and I forget the name of the intersection next. I forget the name of it. It's a few hundred feet. So that's going to happen latter part of March. So could be, yeah. No, not that far. No, the other way. The other way. Yes, yes. So there will be some disruption there where that's a really narrow section. They're most likely going to have to take up the entire road in order to dig and put that pipe in. But they say it's only a couple of weeks.
Is anything contemplated down in Saxonville where you're able to take a left turn off of, I guess it's Concord Street at that point, into Danforth where they cut right through the traffic that's going north, I guess. It's very dangerous.
The infamous left turn, yes, yes. There's been a lot of discussion about that, a lot of discussion. So the new plan is to put that stop bar south of, if you're in the northbound lane, you're gonna stop before Danforth. So it's gonna be a larger stop area, which is gonna affect the queuing, but that'll all be controlled with lights. So, yes, that cut through will still happen. You'll still be allowed to do that, but it's gonna be a much safer condition. Yes, since I've been here, that intersection's been a hot topic. Any other questions?
There's one on Zoom I'm gonna get to. Sorry, then we'll go back to the.
Every time, Adam, I raise my hand.
All right, promise it'll be right after this one. I don't think there's a simple answer to this question anyway, but the question in Zoom is, with regard to more affordable housing, why can't we follow Newton's path to place housing in commercial areas? We should consider taking the red roof in by eminent domain as well as the defunct gas station across from it on Route 30 and build in the style that is already there, an apartment complex with underground parking. So I think that eminent domain is a very complicated process that I think usually does not work when you're talking about an operating business like that. But I would say that I think we have to be careful of our commercial areas. Every time we turn commercial into residential, it means that the tax rate that homeowners pay ends up going up, and the amount we pay in taxes. That said, I think there are some areas that we need to have an open mind about that are commercial. Something like Shoppers World, I think is interesting to me. My in-laws live on Old Farm Path, and they get very upset about this, but I think Shoppers World is a huge shopping center with a giant parking lot that most of the time is partially empty, and there's opportunity there. And then looking at the Tech Park and 990 areas of Framingham. But again, I think it has to be done very carefully. And, I think any development in Framingham there isn't a good place for it right now. The traffic is bad everywhere. So I think what I would like to see the state do, since they're spending billions of dollars to straighten the pike and, create a lot of value for Harvard University, is maybe make a commuter rail that's reliable, high speed, maybe add a third line with a bullet train or something like that. Like why do other countries have these things and we can't get them? The commuter rail looks the same as it did 40 years ago. So, all right, then yes.
All right.
You want the mic?
I'm gonna need the microphone.
Oh,
I've been
okay.
waiting here for an hour and a half.
Okay.
A couple things to clear.
I'll even put the camera on.
Condominiums are controlled by your condominium documents. And these documents have been around for quite a while, and they go back to when water was cheap. And they typically have 1 meter, and it's part of your condo fee, that the water gets divvied up, just like the electricity in the common areas. So for the city of Framingham to go through and individually meter every condominium, you'd first have to, if they're even willing to do it, you'd have to deal with your condominium association and the lawyers to get that changed. As far as the Knobscott Plaza, I pretty much went to every meeting for the first go around. That's how Christine and I became good friends. Kathy Vassar was there. We had meetings. I remember at the Heritage, it was a room bigger than this. It was jammed. And a lot of people, I guess, were under misunderstanding that they thought that was a binding meeting because they spoke about what they wanted. And when it came time to have the voting meetings, the real meetings, there weren't many people there. Kathy was there, I was there, and there weren't, and of course it was through the end of the season. I don't know if that was by design by the developer, but so there wasn't a lot of, pushback from the public on that. So I guess the lesson to learn is, go to these meetings. Planning board is in-person meeting. I'm still a fan of in-person meetings. So that's pretty much it. Then I'll get to my honey-do list. First of all, is to do DPW and the police. And I want to say, first of all, the comments I make is not criticism. I think you guys do a fantastic job. We don't have sidewalks in Knobscott, but I have to tell you, DPW, fantastic job with ice and snow. I know when I get into Sudbury and when I get into Mass Highway on Route 20, it's not the same. Police, you have a You have a traffic officer, Officer Gatlin, you gotta clone that guy. He comes out and he parks in my driveway. I called, Lieutenant, Wareham one day and I said, he said, send me an email because the poor guy gets all these criticisms when people end up with a ticket. And he's fair. I've had neighbors that got pinched, you know, they were going to the airport, they're rushing to get to the airport and, you know, and I told him, I let him use my driveway. And he's pretty fair. He'll tell me, you know, that guy, you know, he gets warnings and when people, and he also finds out drivers that shouldn't be on the road. What street is this? I'm on Nixon. Now you're gonna get my Nixon line. Yesterday, after last winter, I called twice to Chrissy. I'm sure she gave the message about deterioration at the edge. And that road was just paved about 5 or 6 years ago. Peter Sellers did. And it's the heavy trucks, when there's two, they push over, they break the edge of the pavement. There were 5 or 6 spots. There's one spot now, and it's an Eversource trench at 98 Nixon. Get your list out, Bill. And it's a settlement that has to be fixed. But I don't know how you guys do it, if you throw it on Eversource or what you do. Yeah. And now, Palmetto Road, and Nixon Road, we got paved by Peter. It's in decent shape. I bitched and moaned, pardon my French, about Grove Street. I grabbed poor Christine one day, it's from Shaw's, and I brought her out to Grove Street, and I looked at it, and I said, see these roads? I brought it down to Palmetto, and I said, we're forgotten up here, okay? We pay a lot of taxes and we're forgotten. So Palmetto Road, on the end towards Wayside, it's where the two paving, when they went through the stripes, the cold joint, when they paved, it's deteriorated. It needs to be ground, and you guys know what you gotta do. Just take a look at it. So that's that. Now, pole number 35 on Nixon Road. This is another one for your list, Bill. That pole snapped this summer. Tree came down, fell on the spacer wire, pulled it, snapped the pole. It was a Sunday. Eversource come out, put the new pole on it. It had a lamp on it. The lamp has disappeared. The lamp was on the ground, and I put it into the system you guys have online. The neighbor across the street did. The neighbor across the street said somebody come out from the city and said there was never a lamp there. If you go, the lamps are put on every other pole. So if you go through, so now I looked the other day and the lamp disappeared. So I don't know, you know, someone has to call Eversource, get it, why, you know what you have to do on that. Okay. Now, my pet peeve or whatever. And you remember the Grove Street building, the traffic commission, when you put those humps in. And I mentioned that Canton had some humps or plateau, whatever you want, tables, that they kept you at the speed limit, but you didn't feel like it. Those ones that are out there are 10-mile-an-hour humps. And something has to be done different. I mean, and you don't see them. That's another thing I want to say. We'll get into the markings. But if you could look at them in the design, I know the horse is out of the barn now, but if you could look at them, Brookline has the same thing. I guess a car, you know, I'm sure he was speeding, she was speeding, and he ended up, he hit the first hump, I guess, and he went off the road and hit a tree or a pole. You know, I mean, that's, you know, but it's just, the thing is too, they're not marked very well. When the humps were first put on Edmonds Road, you had that diagonal chevron striping 50, 60 feet back. When you repaved Edmonds Road, that disappeared. So now at nighttime, you hit that first one, you forget, and even what's on the top, and when you have salt stain, now with the couple stripes that are on the top, you don't even see them at night. I mean, I'd ask that both police, fire, when you come out of here, take a right down Edmonds Road, go over them and go there. They're a deterrent to emergency vehicles. They're a deterrent to fire vehicles. They're a deterrent to the police vehicles trying to get over them. I mean, if you could redesign them, it would be helpful. But the other thing is, when I went to the meetings, Bill, I said, what are we going to do? Put speed humps from this point on Grove Street all the way to Framingham Center? I mean, there's a perception that people think that once they got over the humps, they lost time. I said this before. So when they hit Edmonds, they hit Nixon Road, coming up to where I am, going to Route 20, they nailed it. The same way going to Framingham Center. I've been behind them. I've had people pass me. So I think the markings of them, if you could relook at the design of those, and again, it's not criticism, it's just me. You know, I'm a former engineer, so we always make things better. Let me see what else I got. You know, now the other thing is, what are we doing? I mean, is Officer Gatlin, you brought in a second guy for him too, right?
So yeah, the traffic unit for years.
You want, here, and then I got more. But anyway.
So the traffic unit for years, when we were struggling to hire, with just one officer, sometimes there were no officers. We brought in another young man to strictly just traffic enforcement with Officer Galvin. And we also give the patrol cars the certain areas to go to as well. The problem with the patrol cars is they'll set up and then they get dispatched to a call. So we want to have that dedicated traffic enforcement unit. My goal is to keep increasing the traffic unit while I increase the police department over the next few years. Because I could go to community meetings where there was a home invasion and that lasts about 2 minutes and then it goes to traffic. So traffic is very important. The next person we bring on traffic will actually be an evening shift traffic officer. So that answers your question. Yes, we need to keep that unit growing, and there's several complaints. We try to hit them all, and we do hit them. You made a great point. We will come to your neighborhood, and I will be very blunt with you. We end up writing all your neighbors. Those are the first people that are speeding. Yes, absolutely, people are speeding, cutting through, but most of your neighbors are the people that are making your neighborhood havoc.
Well, you folks, you know, have done a great job, and I know it's, you know, both DPW and police, you know, you've got budget constraints, manpower, you were short, that's why I didn't keep calling on the pavement issues on Nixon Road, it was from last winter. But, and I know Christine does a good job, so I mentioned to her. The other issue is, and I think, and again, the traffic is, you know, I live on Nixon Road. Nixon Road, it's all over Framingham, it's epidemic, and I realize that, and so something needs to be done. And the same thing with my next subject, trucks. Since Waze has come in, we've got trucks, and over on Route 20 at the former Post Road Auto, that's a rubbish transfer station. Framingham has their contract with them. As a matter of fact, there was a Framingham sanitation guy that insisted on going on Nixon Road to dump his load. And one day he almost got in a head-on collision, and I called back then, I complained to Blake. And next thing I know, you know, I worked at the electric company for 40 years, so I know unions. I had every sanitation truck coming up Nixon Road, you know, but anyways, that's, you know, and so anyways, that's, you know, it seems to be the Framingham sanitation, it's all the other trucks. I've got Waste Management, we got BP, we got Lawrence, we've got car carriers to deal with the dealerships, the used cars over on Route 20 in Marlboro. When the gas station was being rebuilt, Powell Sand and Gravel, and I told Christine, and whatever's put in the planning board regs, who's going to enforce that? But he's in Lunenburg, 495 to 20 to Nixon Road to Edmonds Road, his gravel trucks, his low bed trailers. And it's not just a job like that. It's food trucks, delivery trucks. And I'm sure it's not Nixon Road, but if it's Nixon Road, it's Edmonds, it's Grove, but it's over on the south side too. I mean, someone needs to look at this and say, you know, I know there's state control on some of this, but needs to look at this and say, what areas of Framingham can we remap for trucks? We've got, you know, 2 Mass Pike exits. What other city in town has 2 Mass Pikes? I guess Newton does. But anyway, I grew up in Newton. Anyways, but we've got Route 9, we've got Route 20 to the west. So these people, they're all traversing through, you know? So anyways, that's pretty much, I got 2 sheets here. Let me get to the next one.
I got the mic back. I do want to make sure other folks, because we only have a few minutes left.
How do I get a sign for my house? How do I get a sign? I want to put a sign on my property.
For no rezoning Knobscott or?
Where do I get those signs from? Who applies that? I'm the guy. I'm the guy, the Italian guy. I'm the you want a sign? Come to my house. I'll deliver them to you if you want.
Yes, if you want a no rezoning Knobscott.
I want the signs.
Yes.
Scan the sign. It goes right to my phone. If you want one, I'll bring it to you. I'll sign it for you too.
Wow, all right, very nice. I know we have a few minutes left and people are filtering out, but I just wanted to say thank you to DPW and to Chief Baker for coming here today. You know, there are no obligations to be here. We have a million things to do, and we really appreciate it. So thank you very much. All right. Any other last questions from folks? Last comments?
Thank you.
All right, I see the last word. Thank you for coming out. You wanna?
I was just gonna say thank you and ask him what's the game plan for the trucks. I mean, if we have any hope.